And in some ways, if you don't know who your identity is, like, especially when you're younger, then, like Secret was saying, it's all the more easier to get shaped by whatever relationship or circumstances you're in versus having the time to have it, figured out. We have that high school, early college years where we'll say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? But that's really all the time or questions that ever gets put to you about identity. And it's all kind of career focused versus who God has called you to be.
Welcome to Girl Talk. I'm Nicole D. Miller, author, blogger, speaker, hybrid book publisher, and your host. At Girl Talk, we are a safe space for female leaders to engage in healing and edifying conversation. This is your Me Too empathetic corner, where we have authentic and transformative dialogue designed to uplift and connect high-achieving women like you. Are you looking for a safe space to cultivate sisterhood with other like-minded female bosses? Leave your cape at the door and join the conversation. Welcome back to Losing Us in Relationships. I'm your host, Nicole D. Miller. Relationships have a way of shaping us, challenging us, and sometimes, without realizing it, causing us to lose touch with who we are. Today, we're continuing the heartfelt conversation and how often we as women lose ourselves within the complexities of love. Joining us are 5 incredible guests who bring their unique perspectives and hard-fought experiences to this table of honesty and growth. Lisa Evans, Esperanza Gallon, Secret James, Sophia Webb, aka Sophie Absolutely, and Leilani Wells. We will address powerful influences like faith and culture. How do these forces encourage us, even pressure us, to settle into relationships that don't always align with our true selves or purpose? This episode is an open, raw, and vulnerable space for reflection and connection. We invite you to sit with us, share in our stories, and perhaps spark some important questions in your own life. Together, we'll explore why so many of us get lost in relationships, the importance of uncovering our true purpose, and the powerful advice we'd whisper to the younger versions of ourselves. So, grab your favorite beverage, get comfortable, and join the conversation.
So I guess it's my turn. I would say purpose to me is who I am eternally. It is branching off of my eternal identity and how that manifests in the natural. But I think, as Bronza touched on this before, it manifests differently at different seasons. I talked about the writing. I know for me, purpose in this season is curating Black stories that infuse spirituality. Ultimately, I want to bring forth transformation in my community. I know that any of my books, even my blog and my writing, is all about healing and encouraging other people to overcome. We have hardship in this life. I face different hardships. So my heart is really to show other people that you can overcome, that even though difficult things are happening, there's a way on the other side of that. I think Esperanza also touched on community. I'm huge on that. So that's been really great in me learning my purpose, having that tribe, having those sisters and those people that you're doing life with who love you genuinely. And it's really an iron sharpening iron type of thing. They help you grow, they help you mature. So for me, protecting it, I love what Sophie said about the alone time. She already knows I'm all about it. And I call myself a social introvert. So if you know me on social media or whatever, you probably think I'm out here all the time. But all of those events that I go to, I have to take my naps every day. I have to make sure that I have the energy for them. I took a nap today just so I could be here for y'all. Like I need to make sure I get mine in for me to reproduce and pour out to others. And I know in different seasons that'll look different. If I had kids, it would be a totally different situation. But right now, because it's just me, I have the luxury of allowing myself to get my needs met before I'm moving and shaking, like Sophie said. So I love all those tips. I heard the word boundaries a lot. I did want to share. I went through a really great epiphany in my early 30s, not the old than that, but in my early 30s, I had a great epiphany of boundaries in my life and how unhealthy I was in my codependent ways. So a couple of the books that helped me during that time were called Boundaries and Boundaries in Dating. They're by John Townsend and Henry Cloud. And those books were revolutionary for me. They just give you practical tips on being a healthier person. So if anyone wants to check those out, those could be of assistance also. So I'm going to throw out our next question and we will change up the order. So clearly, y'all, I don't know if you remember all the order. So, please remember your order. We're going to start with Secret and then Esperanza and then Sophie and then Lisa and then Leilani. Okay, y'all got it? Because I can't repeat it. Okay. So the next question is, do you think women see their identity through having a man? If so, why or why not?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Women see themselves, their identity through having a man. And, you know, the biggest clue on why they do it, because everyone puts so much, so much stake into marriage. I got to get married. I got to get married. I got to do this so he can marry me. If I don't do this, then maybe he won't see me as wifey material. We just go ahead and giving the cow away, no price tag on it. Just here you go, here the cow, here go the milk. You can do whatever you want because women are naturally the nurturers. Like we're naturally wanting to be a partner. Is why were we born with these things? Well, because if you take it back to biblical sense, that is the whole reason women were even created. So, it's just a natural thing for us to completely see ourselves through a man. And the greatest example, I don't even want to put a Y on it. The greatest example that I can give is myself in previous relationships. Whatever they wanted to do, I conformed to be whatever that was. Whatever they said that they wanted in a woman, I was that woman. But then everything falls apart the one moment that I'm not that woman, because that's not who I am. So yeah, 100%. We definitely, I don't even know sometimes if we know our identity without a relationship. And I think that's why so many women go through midlife crisis, as they call it. I definitely think that that's why we go through those, because we don't know who we are. We're mothers young most times, or we marry young most times, or we get our identity from what is around us, where we get to experience, i.e., our parents, our mother, our grandmothers. So yeah, it's a generation of no identity.
Mm, good.
All right, I remember it. I'm next. I definitely wholeheartedly agree with you, Secret. I feel like even if the woman herself doesn't feel like that pressure or getting that sense of identity, then those external forces will push it on them. Like I work with kids, and kids have a loose understanding of life. And the amount of times that they will ask me, like, okay, so you're not married, so you don't have kids. Please explain to me, are you okay living by yourself? I'm so concerned. Like, they don't understand. And in a cute way, they're like, well, who takes care of you if you live by yourself? Um, but also, even grown adults, even other women that will ask, like, well, why aren't you married yet? Or why don't you have kids yet? Or even point blank, I've had like guys on dates say, like, you've never been married, you don't have any kids. Well, what's wrong with you? Like, why aren't you taking it? Like, you seem all right, but you must not be, since these things have not happened yet. So definitely, I feel like the lot of the external pressure And that, I think about that scripture of like Eve desiring her husband. And so that's that natural longing for relationship and family and community and to be with a man. I think you can definitely get caught up in all that. And in some ways, if you don't know who your identity is, like, especially when you're younger, then like Secret was saying, it's all the more easier to get shaped by whatever relationship or circumstances you're in versus having the time to have it, figured out. We have that high school, early college years where we'll say, well, what do you want to be when you grow up? But that's really all the time or questions that ever gets put to you about identity. And it's all kind of career focused versus who God has called you to be. So a lot can be misguided.
Thanks, Hope Esperanza.
Okay. Wait, am I next?
Girl,
Yes, I am. Right, I forgot you. Everybody said a lot of what I agree with as well. I definitely think that identity for women is heavily to the relationships with their men. Just again, I feel like I'm gonna be repeating, but it's just at the end of the day, women, especially on depending on your level of understandings or your belief systems, we were created for one another. And so I just think innately, kind of making it more like broad, but I think that in general, the people we're in relation to is a part of our purpose. So innately, we as women, very specific to our man, it's going to be a part of our purpose. But identifying, it's difficult because with me, identity is like a tricky thing for me. I'm kind of like a walking paradox with things. Like I believe both sides of things. And with identity, I believe identity is definitely something that is innate and it kind of is just who you are. But I also think that we have adapted certain things that have became our identity based off of our egos, and so I feel like I'm going off topic, but I'll just say that I think in general, relationships in general are a part of our purpose. So innately, the closer you are to a person, it kind of becomes a part of your purpose. And so we have to be careful just with that to not lose ourselves in that. So,
Thanks, so.
Nicole, can you repeat the exact question about like how do we identify if we have a man or do we lose our identify?
Yeah, I had to look at it again, girl, myself. So it says, do you think women see their identity through having a man? If so, why?
Okay. Absolutely, we see our identity through having a man at different points in our lives. And it's not just age, it's literally situational, I think. I think sometimes at some points in my life I've strongly identified that to my worth and who I am and all these things. And then other times I'm like, like I don't care. And it's heavily marketed to us outside of the womb. It's like, oh, like this is what we need to have. Look at all the Disney movies. Like we all know, like I think Secret spoke a little bit to, yes, of course we do, and I think another aspect is like, okay, well, if you want to have kids too, then that's a way to get lost in that. I'm 43. I am thinking about it a lot because my window's closing, and I don't want to think about things outside of my needs. And every day I like think about that because I'm like, okay, do I have to sacrifice who I am? Like, what is this going to be? Or, do I have to look at what looks differently? So I think there's just so many layers to that. But we do absolutely at different points in our lives, I feel identify with that for sure, very strongly too.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mhm.
Yeah, I agree with all the points. I think that as women, like everyone said, we were created to literally be a helpmate for a man. But I think all of people, regardless of gender, were created to worship something. God put in all of us the ability to worship. Now, ideally, He would want us to worship Him. But when we don't, we worship everything else, whether that be money, food, sex, relationships. I think men are just easier for us to worship because we were created for them. So I think that's what also trips up women specifically, is because everyone was created to worship something, ideally God, and when we don't, we worship whatever is next. And for us as men, because we were created to help men. And I think with men, it's more about money, because they were created to be the provider, to work, so they have their identity in their manhood. So I think that anybody, regardless of gender, we are created to worship and bow to something, God. And when we don't, whatever we worship subsequently is where we place our identity. And I think a lot of us, unfortunately, have not been taught at a young age. And that's what I want to do with my children, is to teach them and keep affirming them constantly over and over that their identity is in Christ. I think what also deters us from that is trauma, is societal pressures, like you all were saying, hurt, just a lot of sin and worldly things deter us from really keeping our identity in God and really focusing on God and what we're supposed to do. So I think a lot of women do go through that. And I think it's a combination of things, whether you weren't taught that when you were younger, whether you went through a super, not even super, but any type of trauma that negatively, altered your identity, which a lot of traumas do, and you weren't able to get the healing and the, teaching to get back to where your identity actually lies. So I think a lot of those things contribute to us as women placing our identity or seeing our identity through men. I think men is just one of the easiest things to place our identity in, because we're made for them, and then they're there. They pursue us. They protect us. They do all these things that we want. So it's easy to just, place your identity in a man and their figure. We want to be protected, so when a man comes and they can protect you and provide for you and do all those things that your heart and your soul longs for, it's like, okay, I'm good. That's where I am, instead of really figuring out who you are, figuring out who they are in the core, and not just what they present externally. So, yeah.
Thanks, Lisa. So, listening to you guys, I feel like I would categorize your sharing under these two belief systems of spirituality and the culture. And I definitely resonate with both of those ideas. I feel like spiritually, we're made for men to be a helpmate. I think of Genesis 2:16, where the curse is that Eve's desire will be for her husband. So I think there's some truth to that in how we navigate these relationships with men. And then culturally, Hope brought up a good point, / Esperanza, you guys. I call her Hope because I know her as Hope. But Esperanza brought up a good point as far as the culture putting pressure on us to be married, to be in relationships. And Leilani may have said that as well. It's like, when you're out dating, I hear it so often from men, well, why are you single? As if something's wrong with me. It's like, well, why are you single? You single too. Why is it different that I'm single than you single? And a lot of you guys know my story. Like, letting go of that relationship that I wrote about and how to overcome heartbreak was the beginning of laying down an unhealthy relationship, one that I really, really wanted. And it's been 17 years since then. And so I'm still walking that out, waiting for the right person. And it's definitely not been easy, and it has been a journey. And I've laid down several relationships since then. But it has been by God's leading. And now I understand it really is about my identity and purpose. So I'm appreciative of the grace to be able to do that. I also think it's generational stuff. I think Secret had touched on that. Like, we in a generation of, our mothers and grandmothers, and that was that's how we learned how to interact with men, whether we consciously were aware of it or not. And if they were unhealthy, then we're naturally unhealthy. So we are at 7 o'clock. I don't know if you guys have a few more minutes Because if you do, I would just like to get the panelists feedback on one last question, just to encourage you guys in your own growth and journey. And if you can just shout out a couple of sentences in answering it, so we'll keep it short. And if you gotta go, then that's fine. But the last question I kind of wanted to throw out there is, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you advise her to do in your dating relationships? So let's start with Sophie, Lisa, Esperanza, Leilani, and then Secret Left. Okay.
Be harder on them. No, I'm just playing. No, dang, that's a good question. Honestly, I think I would just like speak high, um, elevating words of value and worth, and I'm not exactly sure what that would be, but just truly knowing and valuing yourself, and it'll be so much more easier if you focus on that, and it's not that I didn't necessarily value myself. It's just, um, I think it's just like with that struggle that we as women, we have, and I just think that those relationships may have looked different, at that time. But I was quick to move on. But, maybe I would have been a little bit more disciplined in my choice to even entertain, even though they might have been quick. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, so we keep coming back to this wasted time. But not that time isn't wasted, but so I think that, like, quick answer, that's what I would say.
Thanks, Hope.
I would say to my younger self to know your worth. I went through a lot of heartbreak, a lot of just trauma, added trauma when I was younger dating, because I had unresolved trauma from me being adopted and me experiencing sexual abuse, emotional abuse, all those things as a younger child, and as an adult as well. So because of that, and I didn't heal from those things, and I didn't really seek God for those things. I sought men for those things. So I was, promiscuous as a teenager, which I don't have a problem with sharing because Jesus real, he saved me. So I was very promiscuous as a teenage girl, which is very dangerous, very risky. I praise God that nothing ever bad happened to me, because I could have been a teenage mom very easily, and nothing, no shade to teenage moms, but that could have definitely been me. And all of that derived from me not knowing my worth, me not knowing that Jesus is real and that he had has a purpose for me, and that my purpose was bigger than anything that I was experiencing at that moment. So I would remind remind my younger self to know that you are worthy, you are enough, simply because you are God's child. So regardless of what grades I got, because I used to make great grades until I got to high school, and that was really when my destructive behavior started. Regardless of grades, regardless of personality, ability, all those things, I'm still worthy because I was Jesus made me, So I would really tell that to my younger self, to know your worth, and that worth is found in God, which is never changing.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. I was so engrossed in what you were saying. I was like, I forgot it was me next. I would tell younger me that you're already loved by God, that you don't have to do anything to deserve or earn people's love. And I would tell my younger me that the reason why, the relationship I was in at the time, the reason why he's saying that he loves you is because you are lovable. Like, you don't have to be confused about that.
Beautiful.
I love that. I would say to date with intention. Just understand what you want, and understand that if you date with intention and stay true to yourself, then when a good person is in front of you, and you have to consider, am I going to compromise? Then you're going to know if this is someone you should be compromising with and shifting with, and it's because it's in alignment with what you want, what your desires are, because we're going to have to compromise in any situation. There's always going to have to be compromise. So that's what I would say. And then the other thing I would say is to pay attention to the unspoken. I think that a lot of things men say, they don't use their words to say. But if we really, just pay attention to that, then we can get all the answers we need by what they're not saying. So that's what I would share with my younger self.
That's good. It definitely makes me think of how people show you who they are through their behavior. Like they could say one thing, their behavior is telling you something different. So I would say there is no reason to be afraid. I think when I look back at my actions as a younger me in relationships, there was the fear of being alone working very strongly. And I know that that was generational fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, all of that childhood trauma stuff. And having walked out this journey of extended singleness, I feel like God's shown me you have an abundant life. You have purpose, you have an amazing experience. And it was all on the other side of letting that one relationship go and then letting the other relationships go. It was showing me that there's no reason to be afraid. And that's why fear is not in love. That's why perfect love casts out fear, because fear makes us think that the worst is going to happen, right? But it's a lie. And so I would tell myself, you don't have to be afraid. You don't have to be afraid to be alone.
In this episode, Losing Us in Relationships Part 2, we were able to peel back the layers of a deeply personal yet universal experience, the way women often lose ourselves in relationships. One thing that resonated with me was when we spoke about societal expectations put on women to be in relationships. Esperanza shared that even her child clients were confused by her singleness. That indicates to me that we're taught at a very young age that adult women need to be in relationships. I could almost feel the weight of this unspoken pressure that so many of us have carried silently. It's a pressure that whispers, your value is tied to having someone. But hopefully this episode reminded us this is a narrative we have the power to rewrite. The discussion around discovering your purpose beyond your relationships was a beacon of hope and clarity. How often do we as women prioritize everyone else's dreams while putting our own on hold? This isn't about blame, it's about awakening. It's about asking the important questions. Who am I when I'm not giving to someone else, or when I'm not with someone else? You guys, I never know where these girl talks will go. So I found it powerful that the conversation shifted towards reclaiming ourselves and finding our purpose and protecting our purpose. Here are a few items for you guys to ponder in your continued self-journey of discovering your identity. Have you ever conformed to be what men wanted you to be, like Secret shared? Do you feel you need a relationship to discover your identity? Do you feel pressure, either outward from society or inward, to be in a relationship? Have you ever been asked that question, what's wrong with you? Or given the side eye if you're not in a relationship? To anyone listening, we see you. Remember, you deserve to show up for yourself, especially if you are your only advocate. Self-discovery isn't selfish, it's necessary. It's a way of ensuring we bring our fullest, happiest selves into our relationships, rather than be lost in them. If you find yourself resonating with this conversation, take a moment today to reflect. What are the passions, hobbies, and dreams that make you feel alive? More than likely, those desires and interests will point you in the direction of why you were created. If you enjoyed this discussion, make sure to tune in to our next episode, Are Good Friends Hard to Find? And remember, I attract amazing women doing amazing things. That means, sis, you're amazing. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. To continue the conversation, join our Girl Talk community by following @GirlTalkCLE on Instagram and Facebook.com/HTOHB, where you can join the Girl Talk Facebook group. You can follow me personally on Instagram @HTOHB, on Facebook.com/HTOHB, and at YouTube.com/@HTOHB. Feel free to reach out via email info@indiemillerpublishing.com. If you're a writer who wants to take the next steps into becoming a published author, you can book a one-on-one consultation at indiemiller.pub. Just let me know you heard about my publishing house through Girl Talk, and I'll give you a 50% discount on our one-on-one. If you'd like weekly inspirational nuggets, you can subscribe to my blog and monthly newsletter at NicoleDmiller.com, where you can learn more about me and my writings. Till next time.